The commercial airliner was losing altitude at 3,000 feet per minute when Staff Sergeant Maya Chen opened her eyes in row 12. What she saw through the small window made her blood freeze. They were diving straight toward downtown Seattle at 400 knots, and the cockpit had gone completely silent for the past 90 seconds. The passenger in 11A was hyperventilating into an air sickness bag. A flight attendant stumbled past, her face chalk white, speaking rapidly into the intercom about emergency positions. But Maya's trained eyes were locked on something else entirely. The Boeing 737's wing configuration, the angle of descent, and the specific oscillation pattern that told her exactly what had happened to the flight crew. She unbuckled her seatbelt and moved toward the cockpit door with the fluid precision of someone who had spent years calculating trajectories under pressure. The lead flight attendant, tears streaming down her face, grabbed Maya's arm. "Ma'am, please return to your seat. We've lost contact with the pilots and we're going to crash." Maya looked at the woman's name tag, Jennifer, and spoke with calm authority that cut through the cabin's rising panic. "Jennifer, I need you to unlock that cockpit door, right now." "I can't do that. Regulations state, those regulations assume your pilots are conscious." Maya's voice carried the weight of someone who had made life or death decisions at 10,000 feet. "Your captain and first officer are suffering from hypoxia. They've been unconscious for at least 2 minutes, which means we have maybe 90 seconds before this aircraft becomes unrecoverable." Jennifer stared at her, processing the technical precision of Maya's assessment. Are you a pilot?" Maya glanced at her worn Army combat uniform, at the modest stack of ribbon bars that meant nothing to civilians, at the simple staff sergeant stripes that told only part of her story. "Something like that." The aircraft shuddered violently, dropping another 500 feet in 3 seconds. Through the intercom, a voice crackled with desperation. "Ladies and gentlemen, if there are any qualified pilots aboard this aircraft, please identify yourselves immediately." Maya was already moving toward the cockpit, her muscle memory kicking in as she calculated airspeed, altitude, and the precise control inputs needed to pull a 737 out of an uncontrolled descent. The other passengers couldn't know that she had logged over 2,000 flight hours in aircraft, far more complex than this. They couldn't know that her call sign, Viper, had been earned in the skies over Afghanistan flying missions that officially didn't exist. But to understand how a humble staff sergeant came to save 147 lives at 8,000 feet above Seattle, we need to go back 3 days earlier, to a gray morning at Joint Base Lewis McChord, where Maya Chen was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous missions happen when you're not even supposed to be flying. The C-130 transport touched down at Joint Base Lewis McChord with the characteristic thump of military precision, its 4 turboprops winding down as Maya Chen gathered her single duffel bag from the webbed seating. Through the small porthole window, she could see the sprawling complex of hangars and administrative buildings that would be her new assignment, temporary though it was meant to be. The Pacific Northwest morning was crisp and gray, with the kind of drizzle that seemed to hang in the air rather than fall. Maya pulled her Army combat uniform cap down slightly as she stepped off the aircraft, breathing in the familiar mixture of jet fuel, wet concrete, and the metallic tang that always lingered around active air bases. In the distance, she could hear the distinctive whine of F-15 Eagles conducting training flights, their afterburners creating brief orange streaks against the overcast sky. Joint Base Lewis McChord was impressive in its scope, over 87,000 acres housing both Army and Air Force operations. Maya could see rows of Apache helicopters lined up near the flight line, their angular silhouettes looking like sleeping predators. Beyond them, massive C-17 Globemasters sat ready for worldwide deployment, while smaller training aircraft buzzed in established patterns overhead. The base operated with the constant hum of activity that marked America's premier power projection facility on the West Coast. Maya's orders directed her to Building 2012, Personnel Assignment Division, where she would receive her temporary duty assignment. The walk across the main thoroughfare gave her time to observe the culture of this joint installation. Air Force personnel moved with crisp efficiency between buildings, while Army soldiers displayed the more relaxed confidence of ground forces. The mixture created an interesting dynamic, aerial precision meeting terrestrial pragmatism. She carried herself with the understated bearing of a professional soldier, her 5x6 frame moving with economy of motion that spoke to years of military training. At 29, Maya had the weathered confidence of someone who had seen combat, but her modest staff sergeant stripes suggested a career that had been more about competence than advancement. Her ribbon rack told a different story to those who could read it. Combat action badge, air medal with 3 oak leaf clusters and several others that indicated extensive overseas deployment. The personnel assignment division buzzed with typical military administrative chaos. Clerks processed stacks of orders while phones rang constantly. Maya approached the reception desk, where Specialist Rodriguez looked up from his computer terminal with practiced boredom. Staff Sergeant Chen reporting for temporary duty assignment, Maya said, presenting her orders. Rodriguez scanned the paperwork, his eyebrows raising slightly. Says here you're being assigned to administrative support? That's weird. Your MOS code shows 15T UH-60 repairer. Why would they put a Black Hawk mechanic in admin? Maya had wondered the same thing during her flight from Fort Campbell. Sometimes the needs of the Army don't make perfect sense, Specialist. Tell me about it. Rodriguez printed out her assignment sheet. You'll be working under Colonel Davidson in base operations. Building 2034, 3rd floor. Fair warning, the Colonel's old school. Runs a tight ship, doesn't like surprises, and he's not particularly fond of temporary personnel disrupting his routines. Maya nodded, accepting the paperwork. Understood. Anything else I should know? Yeah. Don't expect to fly while you're here. Colonel Davidson keeps strict separation between administrative personnel and flight operations. He thinks it maintains proper focus and discipline. Rodriguez lowered his voice conspiratorially. Between you and me, he's been burned by personnel who thought they could do jobs they weren't qualified for. Lost some good people that way. As Maya walked toward Building 2034, she noticed the complex hierarchy that governed base operations. Senior NCOs moved with purposeful authority, junior enlisted personnel showed appropriate deference, and officers maintained the careful balance of leadership and approachability that marked effective military command. The whole system functioned like a well-oiled machine, each component knowing its role and executing it with precision. Building 2034 housed base operations, the nerve center that coordinated all flight activities across the installation. Maya could hear radio chatter from multiple control frequencies as she climbed to the 3rd floor, the familiar cadence of air traffic control mixing with tactical communications. The corridor was lined with mission planning rooms, briefing areas, and administrative offices that kept the complex dance of military aviation functioning smoothly. Colonel Davidson's office occupied a corner position with windows overlooking the main flight line. Maya knocked twice and entered when commanded, coming to attention before the colonel's desk. Davidson was a career Air Force officer, probably mid-40s, with the lean build and intense focus of someone who had spent decades in aviation. His office walls displayed the typical collection of unit photos, aircraft portraits, and commendations that marked a successful military career. Staff Sergeant Chen reporting as ordered, sir. Davidson looked up from her file, his expression neutral but assessing. At ease, Sergeant. I've reviewed your records. UH-60 repairer, multiple deployments, solid performance evaluations. I'm curious why they're sending me a helicopter mechanic for administrative duties. Sir, I'm here to serve wherever the Army needs me. Good answer. Davidson closed the file. Here's how this works. You'll be supporting flight operations coordination, scheduling, logistics, personnel tracking, Nothing glamorous but essential work. I run a professional operation here and I expect personnel to stay within their assigned duties. Clear? Crystal clear, sir. What Colonel Davidson couldn't know was that Maya's personnel file contained several classified addendums that wouldn't appear in standard records. Her actual military occupational specialty had been changed for security reasons, masking years of training and operations that technically didn't exist in official documentation. The modest staff sergeant stripes were part of a cover that allowed her to move through military installations without drawing the attention that her real credentials would generate. Maya's first week at Joint Base Lewis McChord revealed capabilities that didn't quite match her paperwork. While processing flight schedules in the Base Operations Center, she caught discrepancies in fuel calculations that had escaped notice from more senior personnel. Her corrections prevented potential range miscalculations that could have left aircraft short of their destinations. "How did you spot that?" asked Master Sergeant Williams, the flight operations supervisor reviewing Maya's work. "These fuel planning charts require advanced understanding of aircraft performance characteristics." Maya looked up from her computer terminal, where multiple flight tracking displays showed real-time aircraft positions across the Pacific Northwest. "I've always been good with numbers, Master Sergeant. Basic mathematics applied to the published specifications." Williams studied the corrections more carefully. Maya had identified not just computational errors, but subtle variations in aircraft loading that would affect fuel consumption rates. The level of detail suggested intimate familiarity with aircraft systems beyond what any mechanic should possess. This kind of analysis usually requires pilot-level training and performance planning. "Sometimes you pick things up from working around aircraft," Maya replied, returning her attention to the scheduling software. But Williams wasn't satisfied. Over the following days, he began paying closer attention to Maya's work patterns. She demonstrated uncanny familiarity with air traffic control procedures, could interpret complex weather data with pilot-level precision, and showed tactical awareness that seemed far beyond her supposed background. When reviewing flight plans, she would occasionally make comments about optimal routing or altitude selection that proved remarkably insightful. Colonel Davidson noticed the pattern during his weekly operations review. "Master Sergeant Williams, this Staff Sergeant Chen. She's been here 10 days and her work quality exceeds some of our senior NCOs. Her flight coordination efficiency has improved by 15%. "Yes, sir. She's unusually capable, almost like she's done this work before at a higher level." Davidson pulled up Maya's personnel file on his secure terminal, scanning for details he might have missed. Her deployment history showed standard overseas rotations, but the locations were often redacted or classified. Her training records indicated completion of various schools, but several entries were marked with security classifications that prevented detailed review. "Her clearance level seems higher than typical for a staff sergeant," Davidson noted. "And these deployment locations, why would a UH-60 mechanic need access to this level of classified information?" Williams leaned closer to the screen. "Sir, I've been wondering the same thing. Yesterday she was reviewing helicopter maintenance schedules and made recommendations about blade inspection intervals that would typically come from flight test engineers. When I asked where she learned that information, she said it was standard procedure from previous assignments." The mystery deepened during Maya's second week when a visiting Apache helicopter experienced avionics malfunctions during a training exercise. The aircraft returned to base with multiple warning lights and systems failures that left the maintenance crew puzzled. Maya was passing through the hangar when she overheard the technical discussion. "The radar altimeter is showing erratic readings, and the fire control system keeps defaulting to safe mode," explained Staff Sergeant Morrison, the lead Apache mechanic. "We've run diagnostics on all the standard components but can't isolate the problem." Maya paused, listening to their technical analysis. Without thinking, she stepped closer to examine the aircraft. "Have you checked the MUX bus connections behind panel 7? Sometimes vibration can create intermittent shorts that affect multiple systems simultaneously." The maintenance crew turned to stare at her. Morrison frowned. "Panel 7? How do you know about Apache internal wiring configurations? That's not something a Black Hawk mechanic would encounter." Maya realized her mistake immediately. The technical knowledge she had just displayed required years of specialized training on Apache systems, training that wouldn't appear anywhere in her official records. I've worked on various aircraft types during deployments. You pick up cross-training opportunities." But Morrison wasn't convinced. Panel 7 access requires specific Apache technical manuals and specialized training. The MUX bus configuration isn't documented in general aviation maintenance guides. He studied Maya more intently. "Where exactly did you encounter Apache systems before?" Before Maya could respond, Chief Warrant Officer Patterson approached from the other side of the hangar. Patterson was a senior Apache pilot with over 3,000 flight hours and 15 years of experience on the aircraft. He had overheard Maya's technical suggestion. "Excuse me, Staff Sergeant," Patterson interrupted. "Did you just recommend checking the multiplex bus connections? Because that's exactly the kind of intermittent fault that would cause these symptoms." But that diagnostic procedure is not in the standard troubleshooting guides. It's something you only learn through extensive operational experience with Apache systems. Maya felt the weight of multiple stares from the maintenance crew and pilot. Her casual technical knowledge had revealed expertise that contradicted her supposed background. Sometimes you encounter similar problems across different aircraft platforms, sir. Patterson's expression grew more curious. What's your actual MOS, Sergeant? 15T, sir. UH-60 repairer. Interesting. Patterson walked around the Apache, pointing to various components. This aircraft uses completely different avionics architecture than the Black Hawk. The MUX bus system is unique to the AH-64 platform. The only way you'd know about Panel 7 access is if you'd received formal Apache maintenance training or... He paused, studying Maya more carefully. Or if you'd spent significant time in Apache cockpits, learning systems from the operator perspective. The hangar had grown quiet, except for the distant sound of aircraft operations. Maya realized that her technical knowledge had created exactly the kind of attention she was supposed to avoid. Her cover assignment was meant to keep her background unremarkable, but her instinctive competence was raising questions that could compromise her actual purpose at the base. Colonel Davidson chose that moment to enter the hangar for his weekly maintenance inspection. He approached the group gathered around the Apache, noting the tension in the air. "What's the status on this aircraft, Chief Patterson?" "Sir, we may have identified the problem thanks to Staff Sergeant Chen's diagnostic insight. She suggested checking the MUX bus connections, which is exactly the right approach for these symptoms." Davidson looked at Maya with new interest. "Staff Sergeant Chen? The same Chen who's been improving our operations coordination efficiency?" "Yes, sir," Patterson replied. She demonstrated remarkably advanced knowledge of Apache internal systems, the kind of expertise that typically requires years of specialized training. Davidson's expression shifted to something between curiosity and suspicion. "Sergeant Chen, perhaps we should discuss your background more thoroughly. It seems your capabilities extend well beyond standard administrative support." Maya felt the careful structure of her cover assignment beginning to unravel. The technical competence that had served her throughout her real career was now threatening to expose the very identity she was supposed to conceal. "Sir, I'm just trying to be helpful wherever possible." "Helpful is one thing," Davidson replied. "But demonstrating expert-level knowledge of classified aircraft systems suggests there might be more to your assignment here than standard temporary duty." The group waited for Maya's response, unaware that they were standing less than 50 feet from where her actual aircraft was hangared under security classification that prevented even Colonel Davidson from accessing its maintenance records. The simple staff sergeant they assumed they were questioning had logged more Apache flight hours than anyone else on the base, but that information was buried under layers of operational security that made her technically invisible to standard personnel systems. What none of them could predict was that in less than 48 hours Maya's carefully maintained cover would become completely irrelevant when 147 civilian lives hung in the balance at 8,000 feet above downtown Seattle. The emergency call came through base operations at 8:47 hours Pacific time. Maya was updating flight schedules when Master Sergeant Williams suddenly straightened at his communications console, pressing his headset tighter against his ear. The color drained from his face as he listened to the transmission. "Colonel Davidson to base ops immediately," Williams announced over the intercom, his voice tight with urgency. "We have a civilian aviation emergency." Davidson arrived within 60 seconds, striding into the operations center where multiple personnel were now clustered around radio equipment. "What's the situation, Master Sergeant?" "Sir, Seattle Approach Control is reporting a commercial aircraft in distress. Alaska Airlines Flight 394, a Boeing 737-800 with 147 souls on board, lost contact with the flight crew approximately 4 minutes ago. Aircraft is in an uncontrolled descent, currently passing through 12,000 feet at a descent rate of 3,200 feet per minute." Maya looked up from her workstation, her pulse quickening. She knew that descent rate indicated complete loss of pilot control, either incapacitation or catastrophic system failure. At that rate of descent, the aircraft had maybe 6 minutes before impact. Davidson moved to the primary communications console. What's their projected flight path? Sir, they're tracking directly toward downtown Seattle. If they maintain current trajectory and descent rate, impact will occur in the greater metropolitan area. Williams paused, checking his calculations. Estimated time to impact is 5 minutes, 30 seconds. Jesus Christ. Davidson grabbed the secure telephone connecting to NORAD. Are we scrambling interceptors? Negative, sir.
F-15s from Portland are airborne but won't reach intercept position in time. The aircraft will be on the ground, one way or another, before military intervention is possible. Maya listened to the radio chatter from Seattle Approach Control, her trained ear picking up details that others might miss.
The air traffic controllers were trying everything: emergency frequencies, transponder code changes, even cell phone contact attempts with airline operations. Nothing was working. Flight 394 had become a 75-ton projectile aimed at one of America's major cities. Master Sergeant, Davidson ordered, coordinate with Seattle Emergency Management. They need to begin evacuation procedures for the projected impact area. He turned to the communications team. Get me a direct line to Alaska Airlines operations. Maybe they can establish contact through company frequencies. Maya stood up from her workstation, her mind automatically calculating the physics of the situation. A 737-800 at maximum descent rate, current altitude, and forward airspeed would impact in exactly 4 minutes and 47 seconds. But there was something about the flight profile that suggested the crew wasn't dead. They were unconscious. Hypoxia, most likely caused by pressurization failure at altitude. Colonel, Maya said, stepping closer to the communications console. Sir, request permission to monitor air traffic control frequencies. I might be able to provide technical insight on the aircraft's condition. Davidson glanced at her briefly. Sergeant, this isn't the time for... Sir, Maya interrupted, her voice carrying new authority. That descent profile indicates pilot incapacitation, not mechanical failure. If the crew is unconscious due to hypoxia, there may still be time for recovery if someone can reach the cockpit and restore cabin pressure. Williams looked at her sharply. How could you possibly know that from radio traffic? The aircraft is maintaining a steady descent angle without oscillation. If it were a control surface failure or engine problem, we'd see erratic flight behavior. This is consistent with autopilot descent mode with no pilot input. Davidson studied Maya more intently. That's a very specific technical analysis, Sergeant. Before Maya could respond, the radio crackled with a new transmission from Seattle Approach. Any station, this is Seattle Approach Control. Alaska Airlines Flight 394 is now passing 9,500 feet in uncontrolled descent. We are broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. If anyone aboard that aircraft can hear this transmission, you must reach the cockpit immediately and restore cabin pressure. Repeat, you must restore cabin pressure and take control of the aircraft. Maya felt her stomach clench. She knew exactly what was happening aboard that 737 because she had trained for similar scenarios countless times. The pilots had probably been unconscious for 6 or 7 minutes now. Without oxygen, they would remain incapacitated until cabin pressure was restored. But civilian passengers wouldn't know how to operate pressurization systems or recover from an uncontrolled descent. Colonel, Maya said, her voice now carrying the unmistakable tone of operational authority. Sir, I need to contact that aircraft directly. Davidson turned to face her fully. Sergeant, what exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that someone aboard that flight needs immediate technical guidance to execute aircraft recovery procedures. The pilots are alive, but incapacitated. A passenger with basic flight training could potentially save that aircraft if they receive proper instruction. And you think you're qualified to provide that instruction? Maya met his gaze steadily. Sir, I know I am. The operations center had grown quiet except for the continuing radio traffic from Seattle. Everyone was looking at Maya, seeing something in her demeanor that hadn't been there during her administrative duties. The modest staff sergeant who had been quietly processing paperwork for 2 weeks was displaying confidence and technical knowledge that suggested capabilities far beyond her apparent rank and assignment. Williams checked his altimeter display. Aircraft is now at 7,800 feet. Time to impact is 3 minutes, 15 seconds. Davidson made a command decision. Sergeant Chen, you have communications. Master Sergeant Williams, patch her through to Seattle approach on emergency frequency. Maya moved to the primary radio console, adjusting her headset and checking frequency settings with practiced efficiency. Her hands moved across the controls with the automatic precision of someone who had spent thousands of hours in cockpits far more complex than any civilian aircraft. Seattle approach. This is Joint Base Lewis McChord Base Operations. I have qualified technical personnel standing by to assist with Alaska 394 recovery procedures. Lewis McChord Base Ops, this is Seattle approach. We'll take any help we can get. Aircraft is now at 7,200 feet, still in uncontrolled descent. Maya keyed her microphone. Seattle approach, patch me through to Alaska 394 on emergency frequency 121. 5. I'm going to attempt direct contact with passengers. As the frequency connection established, Maya closed her eyes briefly, running through emergency recovery procedures she had memorized years ago. When she opened them, Colonel Davidson was staring at her with an expression that mixed confusion with growing realization. Alaska Airlines Flight 394. Alaska Airlines Flight 394, this is Joint Base Lewis McChord Emergency Operations. If anyone can hear this transmission, please respond immediately. The radio crackled with static. Then faintly a woman's voice. This is someone on Alaska 394. Oh God, we're diving and the pilots aren't responding. Maya's training took over completely. Ma'am, this is extremely important. I need you to tell me your exact position in the aircraft and whether you can see the cockpit door. I'm in row 12. The cockpit door is about 20 feet ahead of me. There are flight attendants trying to get in, but it's locked. Maya checked the altimeter display. 6,400 feet and falling. Less than 2 minutes to impact. Ma'am, what is your name? Jennifer, I'm a flight attendant. Jennifer, listen very carefully. Your pilots are unconscious due to loss of cabin pressure, but they're alive. I'm going to talk you through getting into that cockpit and saving everyone aboard this aircraft. Do you understand? I don't know how to fly. You don't need to know how to fly, you just need to follow my instructions exactly. Can you do that? A pause. Then, with determination, yes. Maya looked at Colonel Davidson, who was now staring at her with complete attention. Around the operations center, personnel had stopped their other activities to listen to what was about to unfold. Jennifer, first we need to get that cockpit door open. Are there any tools available? Anything that could be used to force the door? There's an emergency axe in the forward galley. Perfect. Get the axe and break the door open. You have 90 seconds before this aircraft becomes unrecoverable. As Maya continued providing instructions, her voice carried the calm authority of someone who had talked aircrew through emergencies before. Colonel Davidson realized he was listening to operational expertise that went far beyond anything in Staff Sergeant Chen's official personnel file. But at 6,000 feet above Seattle, with 147 lives hanging in the balance, questions about Maya's real background would have to wait. I'm in the cockpit. Jennifer's voice crackled through the radio as Maya monitored the aircraft's altitude, 4,800 feet and falling fast. Both pilots are slumped over. They're breathing but unconscious. There are so many switches and displays. I don't know what to do. Maya's voice remained steady, carrying the authority of someone who had guided aircraft through combat emergencies. Jennifer, look for a panel labeled cabin pressure. It should be above the center console between the pilot's seats. I see it. There are lights and switches. Some are red, some are green. Perfect. There should be a switch labeled cabin press mode and tell me what position it's in. It says manual, and there's a red light. Maya nodded grimly. Explosive decompression had forced the system into manual mode, and without pilot intervention, cabin pressure had dropped to dangerous levels. Jennifer, switch that to auto position. Do it now. The seconds stretched as Maya watched the altimeter display. 4,200 feet. Around the base operations center, every person stood frozen, listening to a civilian flight attendant attempt procedures that required years of training to master. Okay, I moved it to auto. Some of the red lights are changing to green. Excellent. Now look at the pilots. Check their pulse and breathing. The cabin pressure is restoring, so they should begin regaining consciousness in 30 to 60 seconds. Colonel Davidson stepped closer to Maya's position, studying her with intense focus. The technical precision of her instructions, the calm authority under extreme pressure, and her intimate knowledge of 737 systems painted a picture that contradicted everything in her personnel file. "The captain is stirring," Jennifer reported. "His eyes are opening." Maya felt relief flood through her. "Jennifer, help the captain sit upright. Tell him that cabin pressure was lost. He's been unconscious for approximately 8 minutes, and the aircraft is at 3,400 feet in an uncontrolled descent." Through the radio, they could hear muffled voices as Jennifer relayed the information. Then a new voice came through, deeper, male, with the professional composure of an airline captain. "This is Captain Rodriguez, Alaska 394. Who am I speaking with?" "Captain Rodriguez, this is Joint Base Lewis McChord Base Operations. You experienced rapid decompression at altitude. Your aircraft is currently at 3,100 feet in a 30-degree descent towards Seattle. You have approximately 90 seconds to execute recovery procedures." "Copy that. Taking control of aircraft now." Maya monitored the radio as Captain Rodriguez's training took over. She could hear him calling out airspeed, altitude, and power settings as he fought to level the Boeing 737. The descent rate began decreasing. 2,800 feet per minute, then 2,200, then 1,500. "Aircraft is leveling off at 2,800 feet, Rodriguez reported, climbing to 4,000 and requesting immediate vectors to Seattle-Tacoma International. Lewis McChord Base Ops, I don't know who provided those instructions, but you just saved 147 lives. Maya leaned back in her chair, the tension finally releasing from her shoulders. Around the operations center, personnel began applauding, but Colonel Davidson continued staring at her with growing comprehension. "Sergeant Chen," Davidson said quietly. That was not the performance of an administrative assistant. Before Maya could respond, Master Sergeant Williams approached with a computer printout. "Sir, I ran a deeper background check on Staff Sergeant Chen's clearance records. Her actual security classification level is far above what standard personnel files indicate." Davidson took the printout, scanning the limited information available. What he saw made his eyebrows rise sharply. "Sergeant Chen, according to this classified addendum, your real military occupational specialty isn't 15T. Maya met his gaze steadily. "No, sir, it's not. It shows you as 15U, Apache helicopter repairer. But that doesn't explain the flight expertise you just demonstrated." Davidson paused, studying the classification markings. "Unless, there's more to your background than even this indicates." Chief Warrant Officer Patterson had arrived during the emergency and overheard the radio traffic. He stepped forward with the expression of dawning realization. "Sir, I know that voice. The call sign Viper. She's been mentioned in Apache pilot briefings, but always classified above our access level." Maya knew her carefully maintained cover was completely blown. The emergency had forced her to display exactly the kind of expertise she was supposed to conceal. "Colonel, I think we need to have a private conversation." Davidson nodded toward his office. "I think we do." 20 minutes later, Maya sat across from Colonel Davidson's desk while he reviewed classified documents that had arrived via secure transmission from Fort Campbell. His expression had transformed from confusion to something approaching awe. "Chief Warrant Officer Maya Chen," Davidson read aloud. "Not Staff Sergeant Chen. Currently assigned to 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Combat veteran with over 2,000 flight hours in AH-64 Apache helicopters. Distinguished Flying Cross, Bronze Star with Valor, Purple Heart, and..." He paused, looking up at her. "Air Medal with 12 oak leaf clusters. 12. Maya remained silent, allowing him to process the information. "Your call sign is Viper, earned during Operation Enduring Freedom when you single-handedly engaged 12 Taliban positions to extract a surrounded Special Forces unit. You've been flying classified missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria for the past 8 years." Davidson closed the file. "The question is, what is a decorated Apache pilot doing at my base under administrative cover?" "Sir, I'm on medical leave following a combat injury. The cover assignment allows me to remain on active duty while avoiding the attention that my real background would generate. Davidson studied the medical notation in her file. Traumatic brain injury from IED explosion. You were grounded pending full neurological recovery. He looked at her with new understanding. But today you just proved your cognitive abilities are completely intact. Yes, sir. The medical hold was precautionary. I've been cleared for return to flight status, but the Army wanted to ease me back into operations gradually. Well, I'd say your operational readiness has been thoroughly demonstrated. Davidson stood and moved to his window overlooking the flight line. Chief Chen, I owe you an apology. I made assumptions based on incomplete information and nearly wasted the talents of one of the Army's most decorated combat pilots. Maya stood as well. Sir, the cover assignment served its purpose. Sometimes it's useful to observe operations from a different perspective. Davidson turned back to face her. There's something else. Your actual orders show you're here for aircraft evaluation. Specifically, testing new Apache navigation systems before full deployment. That's why you were assigned administrative duties that would give you access to flight operations without drawing attention to the real mission. That's correct, sir. Then I think it's time we got you back in the cockpit where you belong. Davidson moved to his desk and picked up his phone. Master Sergeant Williams, prepare Apache 0405234 for immediate test flight. Chief Warrant Officer Chen will be conducting advanced systems evaluation. He paused. And Williams? Update her billeting assignment to reflect her actual rank and status. Maya felt a familiar surge of anticipation. After weeks of administrative duties and careful concealment, she would finally be back in her natural environment, the cockpit of an AH-64 Apache attack helicopter. As they walked toward the flight line 30 minutes later, Colonel Davidson reflected on the day's events. Chief Chen, in 23 years of Air Force service, I've learned that the military's greatest asset isn't our technology, it's our people. Today you reminded me that we sometimes find extraordinary capability in unexpected places. Maya paused at the hangar door, looking at the Apache that waited inside. Sir, every soldier has a story. Sometimes the most important qualifications don't appear on the first page of someone's personnel file. Noted and logged, Davidson replied with a smile. Now let's see what kind of pilot evaluation reports you generate when you're actually allowed to fly. As Maya conducted her pre-flight inspection of the Apache, word began spreading through Joint Base Lewis McChord about the administrative sergeant who had saved a commercial airliner and turned out to be one of the Army's most decorated combat pilots. The story would become part of base legend, a reminder that in the military, as in life, it's unwise to judge capability by appearance alone. 3 hours later, Maya was airborne in Apache 0405234, testing advanced navigation systems at 500 feet above the Cascade Mountains. The familiar sensation of flight controls responding to her inputs, the tactical displays providing situational awareness, and the powerful turboshaft engines carrying her through the Washington skies felt like returning home after a long absence. Her call sign, Viper, had been earned through combat excellence, but today it had been validated by something equally important: the ability to save lives using skills that transcended military boundaries. Whether flying combat missions in Afghanistan or talking a flight attendant through aircraft recovery procedures, Maya Chen embodied the military principle that true service means being ready to act when lives depend on competence, courage, and the willingness to step forward when others cannot. The modest staff sergeant who had quietly processed paperwork for 2 weeks was gone, replaced by Chief Warrant Officer Chen, Apache pilot, combat veteran, and the woman who reminded everyone at Joint Base Lewis McChord that extraordinary capability sometimes arrives in the most unassuming packages. As the sun set over Puget Sound, Maya's Apache carved through the evening sky, its rotors beating a rhythm that spoke of readiness, professionalism, and the eternal vigilance that keeps America's skies safe. In the operations center below, Colonel Davidson updated her personnel file with a new notation. Outstanding performance under emergency conditions. Recommended for immediate return to full operational status. Sometimes the most important missions happen when you're not supposed to be flying at all.